Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So I'd like to offer my greetings and welcome everyone this evening. So we are midway through August, and at least here in Canada, in Winnipeg, it feels you can feel in the air that summer's getting closer to an end, even though it's still getting warm days. The last few days, you've been able to feel a bit of a cold chill in the breeze. And and then last weekend, we had Ajahn Nando come to visit. And so even though it was just a week ago, it seems like it was quite a while. It's like the Buddha said, and we do in our chanting, morning and evening chanting for the monks. One of them is, the days and nights are relentlessly passing. How well am I spending my time? So it's one of those things, especially when you get older, you really do notice how quickly the days are passing by, how quickly time seems to fly. But it was really nice, and it was a really great opportunity for us to have Ajahn Hasapanyo come and visit. The circumstances for why he came weren't very good. It was for a funeral, but having him here was really nice. Um, Being able to, reconnect and spend some time with, someone who's been a good friend and good spiritual friend, a good Kalyana-mitta to me since basically the first day I showed up in Anachat. I met him within the first day or a couple days of arriving at the monastery as a layman. And then having this opportunity to listen to this really nice Dhamma from him. He did this question and answer, and it was really nice, and there was some really great Dhamma there. And so having Ajahn Hasapanyo come to visit is kind of brought up again this theme that I've been seeing coming up again and again in this past year. It's really the theme of Kalyana-mitta, or our good friends, our spiritual friends, our Dhamma friends, and just how important this is to the path of practice. So at one time, there's in one of the suttas, there's this one time where the Buddha's attendant, we'd call it an upatak in Thai. So his personal attendant, the Venerable Ananda, said to the Buddha, I feel that, having good friends, our Dhamma friends, our Kalyana-mitta is half of the holy life. And the Buddha said, no, 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 don't say that. It's not half of the holy life. It's the whole of the holy life. So, coming from the Buddha, this is very high praise for having Kalyana-mitta, having our Dhamma friends. The Buddha wasn't someone who did a lot of exaggeration or hyperbole or false gratitudes or anything like that. So when the Buddha said that, he really means it. And the absolute importance of having good Dhamma friends. So sometimes, for it can be kind of confusing. We read the suttas, listen to the biographies of these Kruba Ajahns and their different teachings. And one of the themes that you see in the suttas and all the teachings is this focus on solitude, on seclusion, on being alone, on learning to enjoy being alone. The Buddha is always saying to the monks and nuns, go to these empty huts, go to the foot of the trees and practice. So he's encouraging people and the monks and nuns to really go off alone into the wilds, into the wilderness, to find a really secluded place to develop their meditation, to develop their practice. Even in our chants, one of the chants that we do in the mornings in the monastery. For monks is this 10 reflections for one who has gone forth. And one of them, the reflection is, do I delight in solitude or not? So you hear this, and see this and read this again and again, having solitude. But then you hear the Buddha saying like, having good friends and these good relationships. This is, the whole of the holy life. So, it can sometimes seem a little confusing or a little contradictory. And so it's but really they're not, because we have time for our solitude, and we also have these good friends. And having good friends doesn't mean, we have to spend, 24 hours a day with them, or 6 hours a day with them, but just having them there and having them as these good and supportive friends. And you can see the tradition I ordained in, the Wapapong tradition, or this is the tradition of Ajahn Chah. Um, there's this real strong emphasis on doing things communally, on having friends, on developing this relationship, this community, this sangha we have with each other. And you still do get a lot of time to go off and practice on your own, to be by yourself. But there is a lot of focus, especially in the beginning phases of training, on doing things together. So we come together, we do our morning chanting and morning meditation. We go on our alms round together. We do chores together. We do our evening meditation and chanting together. There's always these things we're doing together. And Lumpur Biak explained this to us when I was living at Wat Phakram. He was saying that he said back in the old days, the early disciples of uh, Lumpur Mun, he said, you had Lumpur Sam, Lumpur Tate, Lumpur Fun, all these really old generation Kruba Ajahns. And he said, when they ordained, they were able to just go out into the forest and sit meditation for 4 or 5 hours without moving, no problem. And he said it's not like that for us. He said we don't have that spiritual qualities coming into it like they did. So Lumpur Cha had us practice together to support each other and to help each other. And it's you see this in anywhere in life. The idea of the peer pressure. And peer pressure has more effect than other things, and not in a negative way, in a positive way. So I could see this myself when I was new at the monastery. So when I arrived at Wat Pananachat, at that time there was a different abbot, and he had a different style of practice. He was doing this style where there wasn't any group activities. Everything was basically on your own. So you'd have to, the only thing we did together was we'd go on our alms round, then we'd have the meal together, your chores you did on your own whenever you wanted. And then there was a afternoon tea time for anyone living in the monastery. And that was it. Outside of that, it was all just practicing on your own. And for me, I was, 21. I was this scattered, kind of energetic, over energetic, very social layman, teenager, basically. And it was really hard for me. And I didn't really feel I was benefiting from that. Every morning, the morning bell would ring at 3 o'clock, and you're just supposed to meditate by yourself in your kuti. So every morning I'd wake up, I'd start sitting meditation, and then my back would start getting a little sore. And so I'd decide, okay, I'm going to lie down, but I'm not going to stop meditating. I'm not going to go to sleep. And then I'd fall asleep and wake up a couple hours later in time for the morning alms round. And it just seemed to happen again and again. But then when I was a novice, we had this change of abbots, and the new abbot went back to the more traditional Ajahn Chah style of running a training monastery, where we had these group activities together, and we had their bell would still ring at 3 o'clock in the morning, but at 3:30 we'd get together in the meditation hall. We call it the sala, and we do group chanting, and then we'd meditate together. And it just changed everything for me. It was so much easier to stay awake. You're nowhere near your pillow, so it's you're in a hall with a group of people, so it would be a little awkward trying to fall asleep there. But having this support, we're all coming together, we're all doing this together, it really helped me. And then over time, I started to develop that ability, getting used to practicing, meditating that time. I developed the ability to be able to do that on my own. So that later, when I was living on my own, going and living in solitude and stuff, or living in places where there wasn't morning and evening chanting and meditation, that I was able to do it on my own. So these are some of the benefits we can have from having our good friends, having our Dhamma friends, is that, we support each other. And it doesn't have to be just, 3 in the morning meditation. It's everything, having someone who has these shared values and who's walking the same path of practice, you're supporting each other to do good. So you can really see it on the flip side. You can see it when someone um, has friends and a group of friends that can really bring them down. For I think for most parents, when their kids hit that certain teenage year, that's one of the biggest fears for them. One of the things they worry about the most is, if their kids are going to get in the wrong group of friends, and they can just watch how a group of friends can really bring them down if they're really into negative, unwholesome things. And so this is just, some of the support we can have from having our friends. One of the um one of the other benefits we can have from having our good friends is um they can help us, they can point out stuff to us that we don't see ourselves. So, in life we all have blind spots. We all have these areas where we're maybe we just miss something, or we're just not very self-aware, or we aren't catching situations properly. So really having these friends, having these Kalyana-mitta, someone you trust, someone who you're good friends with, who can actually help you out and point these out to us, is a real benefit. It's a real gem. The Buddha said it's someone who points out our faults, is a real treasure to us, and can really help us grow. And he also said the opposite. He said, someone who he was talking to monks in this situation. He was saying, a monk who has become unadmonishable, um, he said that's a death in the holy life. And we always use the word admonish. Uh, it's a really heavy word, and I think it comes off a lot heavier than the actual intended meaning. So, admonish, that's just pointing out, something someone else has done wrong, or someone else pointing it out to us. And it's, admonish always sounds really heavy, like, you're getting like, scolded by the principal or something like that. But it's not like that. It's just this, a very friendly uh, pointing out something wrong to someone else, and it really has that emphasis on being friendly. So for monks, we actually, um, we live in this environment or these circumstances where it's really encouraged for us to point things out to each other. But there is rules, and there is ways to do it, because it can be, we can all get kind of sensitive, or we can have the wrong intention when we are pointing stuff out to other people. So one of the things is, for monks, we have to, when we do admonish another monk, we have to intend to do it at the right time and not at the wrong time, because it's one of those things that, even if uh, what you're saying is right and it's helpful and there's all these things about it, like time and place can make such a difference, and time and place can really affect how it goes over. So one of the examples I saw as a junior monk, one of the clearest examples of someone getting the time and place wrong was there was this one monk, really good monk. He had really good intentions, but he was wanting to move his visa and start doing his visa at a different monastery. He just started living full time at this other monastery. So he was asking the abbot if he could change his visa over and start doing it at this other place. But he picked the wrong time to do it. And so it was this very senior monk, very respected monk, Lumpur Mahamorn, had just died. and we were at his monastery, and we were literally moving his body into his coffin. And as we were moving the body, this monk decided this was the time to ask about moving his visa as we're literally moving a body. So you probably couldn't have got the worst time and place to do that. And I pointed that out to this monk afterwards, and he really just couldn't see it. He was really surprised that I thought that was the not a great time and place. And we also have to, as monks, we have to, when we're pointing something else, admonishing another monk, we have to speak on what is factual, what is true, and not say things that aren't true. So, I mean, again, that's pretty clear and straightforward. You have to actually know, not just something you suspect or not quite sure on. And we have to speak gently and not harshly. And this is really important because, again, the way you say it, the way you give this message can really affect the way they receive it. So, a lot of times in life, a lot of us have known those, like, I tell it as it is people, those people who are just, they go around and they just very harshly say things to people like, oh, hey, Nando, you got fat, or oh, hey, and or you did this wrong, and they'll say it in these really harsh ways, and they try to cover for it and just be like, oh, that's just how I am. I tell it how it is. And even if they are telling it how it is, they're not doing it in the correct way. It was one of these sayings Luang Por Cha used. He said, it's in Thai, tuk de mai jing, jing de mai tuk. So we usually translate it as true but not right, and right but not true. So even if what the information and what you're saying is correct, the way you're saying it, the way you're passing it on to this other person is actually not correct. And we also we have to uh, speak for monks, at least, with things that are connected with the goal. So, not pointing out really trivial, unimportant things which are wrong, but things with the goal. Um, and it's also for monks, before we admonish someone, point out something to someone else. We have to establish in ourselves a heart of loving kindness. We have to develop metta. So we're actually telling someone out of our goodwill for them, not out of aversion, not out of anger, because it's very easy, to point things out as a way to try to hurt the other person. You're not saying it because you want to help them. You're not pointing out this person did this wrong. You're pointing out because you want to maybe feel better about yourself, lift yourself up, or you want to maybe tear them down. And that's not the correct way. That's a bad intention. That's not the correct way to do it. You're not making good karma, and there's a good chance it's not going to be very helpful. So when we do admonish, we do have to develop this heart of loving kindness. And then one other is for monks, we actually have to ask the other person before we point out something which is wrong to them. So before you say, hey, you did this wrong, you actually have to ask, be like, oh, is it okay if I point something out to you? Because we don't always know where the other person is unless we can read their mind. We don't know what's going on in their mind. We don't know what kind of mood they're in, what's going on in their lifetime. So, they may have, just had bad news that, a close family member was in a car accident. They may be dealing with sickness. They may just be in a really bad mood this day. And, so because of factors like that, if you try to point out something they do wrong, not only would they not take it very well, but it can be very harmful. It can really, like, make them spin out, or make them respond with anger to what you have said, even though your intention was to help them. So at the monastery I ordained at Wat Pah Nanachat, um, we have this tradition. When I was a junior monk, I think they still do it, of every we call them Wan Pra. So it's kind of like the holy days. So these are our like weekly observance days. They follow the lunar calendar. So they're on the full moon, the new moon, and the half moons. And so what happens is a lot of the villagers all come together at the monastery to listen to Dhamma talks and to practice. So they'll usually practice day and night. and practice all through the night. And when I was a junior monk, all the monks were required to come together in the sala in the meditation hall and also practice through the night and meditate, doing sitting and walking meditation. And so, you've done this, you've gone practice through the whole night. And it's not just, once the sun comes up, you can go to sleep. No, you've got to go on your alms round for the next day, have the meal. So, as the day goes on, you're getting more and more tired. You can always go and have a rest in the day, but that's a little later on. So because of this, we actually had this rule at the monastery that there was no admonishing anybody the day after one pra. So the day after we had stayed up all night because people can get a little sensitive or a little irritable when they've haven't slept all night long. So this is again an example of the right time and place and being okay. This is maybe not the best day to do it or the best time to do it. So it's also important then so these are some of the benefits of having good friends, of really developing our Dhamma friends, our spiritual friends, our Kalyana-mitta. But one of the things, so once getting Kalyana-mitta, getting these good friends, it's important to be able to keep them and to really be able to live harmoniously with them, or even if you're not living with them, if it's just a friend you see, once a week at a Dhamma event, like at a center, at a monastery, or online on Zoom like this, it's important to be able to maintain these relationships, maintain these friendships, because sometimes it's very easy, sometimes it takes some effort. So in the suttas, uh, there's this big event. It's called the Korlek Kosambi. So it was this monastery. To me, it sounds like it was a really big monastery with a lot of monks. And this dispute started between the two teachers. They had two main teachers at the monastery. One was a Dhamma teacher and one was a Vinaya teacher. And I forget who did which part, but one of them, after using the washroom, because they didn't have toilet paper at that time, you'd use dipper with water, which is still used in Thailand and a lot of warm countries. That's the way to do it. And so after using the washroom, this senior monk had left water in the dipper. And the other one noticed this and is like, oh, hey, actually, you're not allowed to do that. That's a very minor offense. So he went and pointed it out to this other monk. The other monk didn't take it well. And it ended up turning into, over time, growing into this feud between them. And but it wasn't just contained to them. It was everyone in the monastery started picking sides. So the monastery got split into these like two very adversarial factions. And they were, in the suttas, they were saying like stabbing each other with verbal daggers. So not real ones, just like insulting each other, saying nasty things to each other and about each other. And so it was these two groups. And the Buddha himself went to go sort this out. He went there to try to fix this problem because, you can't really practice Dhamma if you're in that kind of environment, right? And when the Buddha went to sort it out, the monks there basically told him, take off. They said, you're enlightened already. Just enjoy that. We'll sort this out, which is really heavy because, the Buddha literally started the Buddhism. He was the teacher. Most of these people ordained because of their faith in him, their faith in his teachings, and but they were so obsessed with this issue that they would say that to him. And so afterwards, the Buddha goes to the Gosinga Park, and we've got a couple of beautiful suttas from the Buddha's time at the Gosinga Park. And there it's the exact opposite. You have three monks living there, and they're living in absolute harmony. They're getting along really well. So as the suttas say, they're blending like milk and water. And so the Buddha asked them like, what are you guys doing to get along so well and have so much harmony? And one of the monks' answers is that we view each other with eyes of loving kindness, both in public and in private. We speak to each other with words of loving kindness in public and in private. And we also, when there's stuff we want to do, but the community is doing something different, we give up what we want to do what everyone else wants to do. So these are really like great pieces of advice for maintaining friendships, not just living with each other, but maintaining these friendships. So one of the things like viewing each other with eyes of loving kindness, that's looking at the positive uh, aspects of someone else. It doesn't mean you just ignore everything which is wrong, but those aren't the ones you're focusing on. You're viewing them with loving kindness. So it's like, when someone first gets into a relationship, there's always the honeymoon phase. So in the beginning, you see the other person and everything about them is good. You're only looking at the good stuff. They've got no faults. Everything they do is great. But then over time, it can kind of start changing. And then if it really goes down, it turns to the exact opposite. When you look at them, you only see the bad stuff and you forget about all the good stuff. So it's encouraging to, have that loving kindness, look at the good stuff. Doesn't mean you ignore the bad stuff, but you focus more on the good qualities of them. You know, Speaking to them with words of loving kindness. Of course, because it's in public and in private. So of course, with the person, saying kind words to them and having loving kindness towards them. Of course, that's going to make a lot more easier to get along. A lot of people don't like to be around someone who's not saying nice things to them. But the emphasis also, in public and in private. So that's not just saying it, to their face, but also, behind their back. There's nothing which can create more uh, disharmony is if someone, you're finding out someone's talking smack about you behind your back, criticizing you, saying these bad things, and then just all that gossip and that backbiting and stuff, the problems that can create, but also for yourself too. So one of the things is, if someone does something that irritates you, you can notice sometimes that when you start really complaining about them and start really going on about it, it almost feels like it's become more intense, like more real, like you're taking it up another level by moving from just the mental, just the thoughts to the actual like verbal and the speech about them. And so this is an important thing to do is to speak about them to in public and in private with words of loving kindness. And then of course, giving up what I want to do for what everyone else wants to do. So again, this doesn't mean that, you're just to have friends, you have to be a pushover and always do what the other people want to do and just ignore yourself. But it is this, remembering and this of not, it's not all about me all the time and being able to stand back and be like, okay, if say for example, all your friends want to go out for lunch somewhere and you want to go to one restaurant and they want to go to the other one, just be like, yeah, okay, I'll just go with them. It's okay. It's just a meal. It's better to just give that up, what I want to do, and go with all of them. And it leads to more harmony and we can get along a lot easier. So so these are just some reflections on having your Kalyana-mitta, the importance of them, how to maintain them. These are good friends, our spiritual friends, these Dhamma friends who are really going to help support us and help um, be our guides, be our support, and help us along on our path of practice. So I'd like to offer that to everyone as a bit of a reflection this evening.